Hey, good morning, everybody. It's about 8:14, 8:15. And surprise, surprise. You know, everybody knows I'm a wrestling fan, and in case you don't know, I am a wrestling fan. I've been a wrestling fan for most of my life, if you will. But one company that I'm a fan of that I try to watch on occasions is TNA Impact, or Impact Wrestling. Now, I know a lot of people have been very critical about Impact Wrestling over the past few years, and rightfully so. There have been some decisions that they have made that just don't make sense. There have been some things, storyline wise, that they've decided on that just don't make sense. I mean, last year or so, when they did the whole Immortal thing for about a whole year from 2000, from October 2010 to October of last year, when they did that whole thing with Immortal, and they still tried to keep it going, time after time, even after Bound for Glory, nothing succeeded. I mean, you take a look at what they did with Immortal. First, they turned Jeff Hardy heel, making him sort of like the Hulk Hogan. Okay, after what happened with Jeff Hardy, what did they do? They turned to somebody else. And who did they turn to? They turned to Mr. Anderson. And when that didn't work out, who did they turn to next? Kurt Angle. It's like they couldn't decide who, it's like TNA couldn't decide who they wanted to be the figurehead, who they wanted to be the Hulk Hogan, if you will, of Immortal. They couldn't decide it. So, that is why the ratings dipped in a big way, because the Immortal thing wasn't getting over as well as TNA was hoping. Some other decisions some people have said that TNA doesn't make correctly is when they sometimes either book a show or, in most cases, choosing a location for a show. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to the recent TNA shows here in California, especially the base brawl, if you will. I mean, down in Valsyria. I can't pronounce it though, I apologize. I wasn't able to go to that. But here's the thing. Despite taking Impact on the road, as they've been doing, for house shows, and every now and then in the past few months, taking Impact on the road for 2 weeks worth of tapings at a different arena or location, most of the time TNA's had their Impact tapings, has taped Impact, as well as taped a majority of the pay-per-views with the exception of 3 or 4 at the Impact Zone. Now, so far this year, their big 3, if you will, or the big 4, whatever you want to call it, 2 of the big 4 have been outside of the Impact Zone. Alright? Lockdown was in Nashville, Tennessee. Slammiversary is going to be in Arlington, Texas next month. Now, we all know Genesis, that's sort of been regulated to the Impact Zone, so you could probably say it's a big 4 still, but probably it's just a big 3, whatever you want to call it. But if you still want to consider it as the big 4 then as part of the big 4 of TNA, that's fine too. But I look at it now as sort of being regulated to the point that, we only have the big 3, right? So you can accept. So with the exception of Genesis, if you still, like I said, still look at it as the big part of the big 4, being always lately in the past few years being done in the Impact Zone. If you're willing to accept that, that's fine, as long as the other 3 marquee pay-per-views of TNA are on the road, because those are the marquee ones. I mean, Lockdown is the only cage event of the year, the all cage event of the year. Slammiversary celebrates, their anniversary of the company, the yearly anniversary, basically the day, the month, and year, the month that they were created, or they came into being. And Bound for Glory, as we all know, is their WrestleMania. So you would expect and accept the fact that those three at most times are on the road. Yes, there have been occasions where sometimes, let's say like Slammiversary, I think a few years ago, was at the Impact Zone. And the same could be maybe said for Lockdown. But majority of the time in the past few years, they've been mostly on the road. Now, the one that I mentioned last, Bound for Glory, which again, like I said, is one of the marquee pay-per-views, and is their WrestleMania, their Starrcade, their Super Bowl, their World Series. Most of the time, as far as I know, if you look on Wikipedia, you look online, most of the time it's been on the road. Well, not this year, because as I mentioned at the beginning, surprise, surprise, and you can see it up there, Bound for Glory will take place at the Impact Zone this year. That's right. Bound for Glory, instead of being taken on the road, now I'm not saying they won't change their minds. I'm not saying they won't change their minds, but right now, it has been confirmed through several websites like lordsofpain.net and a few others that Bound for Glory 2012 will take place from the Impact Zone. Now I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, why would TNA do that? Why would they want to, have it take place in the Impact Zone? What's the point in that? What is the point in taking their WrestleMania, their marquee event, the one that basically says, hey, this is our showcase of the Immortals. This is our place where legends are made and moments are made. Why take that and regulate it to the Impact Zone? Well, let's not forget, when Bound for Glory first began, it first started at the Impact Zone, so it won't be the first time it's there. But it'll be the first time since it began, I think, since 2007 or something like that? 2006? I can't really remember. But it'll be the first time since it first began. Now again, I know people are going to sit back and they're going to say, well, why? And they're going to ask why. Well, here's the answer. And I'm pretty sure some of you may understand this when I mention it. TNA, according to these several sources, the reason they're doing this, and let me check my time here. The reason they're doing this is because according to several of these sources, they can't make money off a live gate. So they've decided, I guess because of that situation, that they're going to just take their marquee WrestleMania event, if you will, and have it at the Impact Zone. Now you might say, well, what's the point of that? What's the point behind that? What do they mean by can't make money off a live gate? They make money off these live gates at house shows. Okay, let me explain something. The first event they had here in California, it was somewhere, I can't think of the place it was, Ontario, California, or something like that. They only drew 500 fans. 500. Now, I don't know exactly where they had it at, but they only drew 500 fans. I don't know what the attendance was for Bakersfield, but as far as Ontario goes, it was only 500. Now, the base brawl event, or the ballpark event that they had, that drew at least 1,400 people. So that was pretty good. That's an average, all right. That's pretty average for TNA. But again, if you look at that, you say, well, but again, if you look at the difference is these are house shows, so they expect maybe to make at least minimum amount of what they would make at a televised or pay-per-view event at a location like that, or being on the road. They would expect to make double or triple that. But lately they didn't. And I think with what people have reported with lockdown this past year, or 2 months, last month, with lockdown last month, I guess in a way that doesn't help them financially. I mean, here you had Lockdown, like I said, one of the marquee events of the year, one of the marquee events, the only steel cage match of the year. Well, not steel cage match, but the only all cage event where every match takes place inside a cage, including the knockouts, where every match is inside the steel cage. And yet, even though they built up Lockdown's main event, Storm and Rude, basically a month or so in advance, it still didn't help it. Because here's why. Here's why, in my estimation, and I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It's because the title of the event is Lockdown, right? What has been the main event? What has been the main match, the main objective of Lockdown, the main attraction for fans to go and see? The Lethal Lockdown. That's right, the Lethal Lockdown has always been the last match on the card. Or at the Lockdown pay-per-view. It's never been the first match, it's never been in between, it's never been second to last, it's always been the last one. The only exception it's ever been, like in the middle, was at Bound for Glory, and that was it. A few years back, and that was it. Most of the other time, it's been the main event. It's been the main attraction. Yes, I admit 1 year, I admit the Lockdown that they had at the Impact Zone, I don't know how many years ago, I think the first Lockdown they had in the match between AJ and Abyss, yeah, that was one of the exceptions where the main event was not Lethal Lockdown, but instead was a #1 contenders match. I get that. But you have to understand the difference. The difference, that was in the Impact Zone. They knew they were going to have a good crowd. They knew they were going to have a good crowd. And usually, when they take Lockdown on the road, as they have in the past few years, they do it because they know the main attraction that's going to bring people into the arena is knowing that the Lethal Lockdown main event is going to be the main event. The Lethal Lockdown match is going to be the main event. It's not going to be the first match. It's not going to be the match in between in the card. It's not going to be second to last. It's going to be the match. But due to the fact that TNA wanted to build on the Rude Storm feud, and I guess sort of make it as the Rock Cena deal, the Lethal Lockdown match was pushed to the side, and the fact that they didn't properly build it up until about what? A week before it happened? This is why they didn't get the draw they needed. And this is why right now it's being confirmed that they're putting Bound for Glory in the Impact Zone because they don't want to take a chance at another failure. Now again, things could change and they could say, you know what, let's give it one more try, let's take Bound for Glory on the road. But right now, Bound for Glory 2012 is being confirmed for the Impact Zone. But again, that is why I believe they're doing this. Because of what happened with Lockdown. So, I thought I'd just pass that along to anybody that's an Impact Wrestling, TNA wrestling fan, or overall wrestling fan like I am. Because even I was surprised. But like they said, you know, things could change and they could decide to take it on the road. But we don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, last year or so, we thought, with the scheduling, we thought Bound for Glory was going to be at the Impact Zone, and then they took it to Philadelphia. So who knows? They might change their mind and take it on the road. But still, right now, according to the reports, they're doing this. They're doing this because financially they can't make money off a live gate. Well, you know what? When you don't promote your Lethal Lockdown Steel Cage as your main your War Games match as your main event match, and basically regulate it to the first match of the night, that's going to hurt you. So that's all I'm going to say. Comment down below. Tell me what you think. Video response if you want. And I'll talk to y'all later.